So if you missed the last couple weeks, we were doing a study on, well, we call it Sci-Fi Sunday School, and it's about teleportation. And if you haven't been here for a couple weeks, the reason I brought this up is the Malaysian airline Flight 370, several videos came out on it where they showed that it literally disappears, and there's a drone footage and there's satellite footage of it. And it shows these orbs flying around it and spinning around it. Next thing you know, it just disappears. Now, that may sound, and I mean, when you first see it, you just like, ha, 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 you know. But that video is either came out like 3 days after, but they're saying it's just about impossible for them to reproduce all of the information that was needed from everything from weather, location, the exact look of the plane, the way the plane flies, the way the drone, even the camera on the drone is identifiable. And I guess it's a military type drone, military type camera. And anyway, so you're looking at all this, and they literally, what these guys are coming out and saying, the journalists that are, and you can go online, look it up, is saying that we've got defense contractors that have been moving along quite speedily, probably with alien technology, and they've learned how to open up a fabric of space, and we talked about that last week. Anyway, if you go through all three of them, you'll understand what this is all about. What I'm bringing out, whether it's true or not, and I can't vouch for it one way or the other, I think there's something to it. There's a lot being discussed in the science community that has been discussed for years. And I bring up a few things from the past, the Eldridge disappearing, which was the Philadelphia experiment. You know, that movie that you guys watched, that whether it was true or not, I don't know. But something was going on in that time frame. That's when we got the atomic bomb, and all of a sudden technology just took this huge leap forward. And it may be that man has been able to harness some of this stuff. The Lord said there was nothing that they couldn't imagine that they could end up doing, and that's why He confounded their language at the Tower of Babel. And you can go, and that's what we started off with. We went and looked back at that, and the Lord knew, you give man enough time, He'll figure it out. He'll figure it out, and maybe they have. But what I'm bringing out is that what was science fiction to most people, and still science fiction, was a reality in the Bible and commonplace. Teleportation is commonplace in the Bible. Matter of fact, I don't have enough time to go through all of the appearances of angels and everything like that. In fact, we're not even going to discuss those things. I'm going to talk about two more. We got a whole list we did last week, but I'm going to talk about two more in the Old Testament. Then we're going to go over to the New Testament and look at some of the accounts that are given there. The one I want to talk about is Elijah. And I thought this was an interesting description. Look at 2 Kings chapter 2. 2 Kings chapter 2. You know, when you're looking at the verbiage that's used in the scriptures, you're looking at a man is describing what he's seeing, and he's describing it to the best of his ability. He's not putting it in scientific terms. He's putting it in something, it's descriptive, but it's also telling. In 2 Kings 2:11, it says, it came to pass as they went on and talked, this would be him and Elisha, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Now, the first thing, I kind of looked at this, I thought, chariot of fire and horses of fire. Well, they probably weren't a real chariot and real horses, is what I'm assuming. That's what they look like, chariot of fire, horses of fire. Now, maybe they were. Maybe they resembled a chariot and horses. But when I think when we come back at the second coming, we're on horseback. Now, maybe they're horses of fire. I don't know. But I think they're a literal horse in the sense that they're a heavenly horse. Okay? But something brought up Elijah, and he said it was a chariot of fire and horses of fire. But then it's the other thing that kind of made me think, wow, it's exactly the whirlwind into heaven. Okay? I don't think anybody knows what a wormhole looks like. As far as I know, nobody's ever seen one. Well, maybe there's some scientists that know now. I don't know. But I don't know who's ever seen what we call a wormhole, where you go from one point to another through this thing. But every time in Hollywood and in the films, it's always a vortex. It's always some winding, spiraling thing that's going through, and just it's kind of almost like the bottom end of a tornado, really, is what it looks like on horizontal. And it's interesting that he says there he went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Now, God has to get him there somehow. We talked about the distance of about 45 million light years. That's if we're halfway to heaven, halfway to the third heaven right now. 45 million light years away, and one light year was 6 trillion miles. So how is God getting these angels and things back and forth and transporting people back and forth? You said, well, they're just moving really fast. Either that or they just walk right through the fabric of time and space and walk to the other side. They talk about the fabric of space. He likens the universe to his garment or a curtain, he says. And you can just fold that fabric and then step through one side into the other, and guess what? You have transcended an incredible amount of distance. Now, this was all science fiction, but not in the Bible, because it's happening. Elijah goes up into heaven. Well, either he was in that chariot for an awful long time, but he got there pretty quick, didn't he? By the time New Testament rolls around, it tells you he's there. Well, he couldn't, if he was traveling the speed of light, he's still got 44,900,000, he's still got millions of years to go to get there if he's traveling the speed of light. This makes more sense that God can manipulate time and space, and it may be that the angels have this ability, or at least they've possibly figured it out. We looked at some things last week that makes me think that it might be man that opens the portal. Remember, the porter is the one that opens the door over there in John chapter 10. It may be that mankind is the one that opens the portal for the Antichrist to come down. Wouldn't surprise me at all. So he mentions there a chariot of fire, horses of fire, some type of energy, and this whirlwind that looks like a description of a wormhole. Now turn to Zechariah chapter 5. Zechariah chapter 5. Now we're going to talk about some UFOs that show up. Now, there's been some possibilities floated around. I do believe in unidentified flying objects. I do believe that they could be extraterrestrial. Or, one of the things is that they're coming from inside the earth. Now, here's what I know. There is something inside the earth, and there's something above our heads. So, either way, it could be coming from both. Because in the tribulation, not only do you have things coming down, but you have things coming up. So it really doesn't matter. The portal can be, a portal from above or a portal from beneath. Either way, some things are coming up. And we have the appearance of these UFOs in Zechariah chapter 5, Zechariah 5, verse 1 to 3. Then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. I can remember as far back as my grade school where they talked about flying saucer, or these flying objects look like flying cigars. How many have ever heard that? Now, I don't know if they mean that, when a disc is on its side and you're looking parallel to it, it looks like a cigar because it's tapered at both ends. But it's a cylinder. It's a disc. It's a saucer. But I think we'll get to that here. He says, I answered, I see a flying roll, and the length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. That means it's 30 feet by 15 feet if 18 inches is a cubit, which is the standard cubit in the Bible. Not a king's cubit, but a standard cubit. So this thing's, it's small. He only gives you 2 dimensions of it, but so you're kind of like, okay, it's this long or this wide and the breadth of it. I mean, it's a small craft. And good thing, but there's only 2 people on board. Then he said unto me, this is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth, for everyone that stealeth shall be cut off as on this side according to it, and everyone that sweareth shall be cut off as on that side according to it. So this is what is referred to as the shadow of death in the Bible. And this is something that's going to happen during the tribulation. I know we talk about the shadow of death now. I know sometimes we liken it to actually going through the valley of the shadow of death, experiencing death. But this thing, if it casts a shadow, if you're guilty of swearing falsely, or you're guilty of stealing, it'll kill you. This thing's going to be flying around, and if it casts a shadow on one side, if you happen to be on one side of it, and you're guilty, boom, you're dead. You know, I mean, that's what it says. But then it gets even weirder. The Bible always sounds unbelievable until you're face to face with it. So I don't know what all this stuff is. All I know is it's going to show up, and probably has already. Look at Zechariah 5, or look at verse 5 to 8, where it talks about another encounter here. It says, then the angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, lift up now thine eyes and see what is this that goeth forth. Something coming, I guess. And I said, what is it? And he said, this is an ephah that goeth forth. Now the strange thing, man, I'm running ephah all through the Bible, you know, and I can show you where it's a man's name. I can show you where it's a concubine's name. And I can show you where it is a measurement. But that's about it. It's a measurement equivalent to like a bushel. Kind of weird, but he says it's an ephah. And he said, this is, look at this, their resemblance through all the earth. What does that mean? These things are going to be showing up all over the earth, and this is the resemblance of them. It's an ephah. And behold, there was lifted up a town of lead. I know that Dr. Rugby says like a trash can lid, you know. He lifted up a town of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. And he said, this is wickedness. And he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of the lead upon the mouth thereof. Now, I believe there's some more there. I only printed out that much of it. But I do believe it talks about 2 women in the text. And let's see. Yeah, let me get over there. I should have just printed out the whole thing. Zechariah's in here somewhere. Zechariah is a tough book. Verse 9, then lifted I up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out 2 women. So this is a 2-man craft. And the wind was in their wings, and they had wings like the wings of a stork. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Then said I to the angel that talked with me, whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, to build it an house in the land of Shinar. That's where Babylon is. This has something to do with Babylon the Great, or Babylon, Mystery Babylon in the New Testament. So you've got this weird thing, and notice it's women with storks. There's where you get the angels with wings that are usually women, when there are no women angels in the Bible, and they don't have any wings. But this thing does, but he said, this is wickedness. Makes you just want to go home and grab all those little cute little figurines and throw them against the wall. You go ahead and keep your figurines, whatever. The Antichrist will like them. I mean, you know. Anyway, so I thought about that, and I thought, okay, an ephah, a bushel. You know, if you were to take a bushel of corn or wheat or something like that, grain, dump it out. You know how it would pour out? It'd be cylindrical, and it would be like this. It would be almost like a disc on the ground. I don't know. I don't know if that's what he's talking about. The talent of lead, by the way, a talent is also a measurement. It's 130 pounds. So is it this cylindrical thing with a hatch on the top? I don't know. All I know is there's two. At first he says there's one woman in the midst, then he said there's two. I'm not, yeah. Could be. I don't know. All I know is these things show up, and the first part of the text talks about this is what these things look like, or at least the role. By the way, it could be talking about the same thing, just from a different perspective. These things appear all over the earth, according to this, and that's exactly what your Bible tells you. Look, Revelation 12:9 says, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Well, how are they coming down? Everybody, we always talk about the Antichrist and the false prophet, the Antichrist and the false prophet, like they're the only two showing up. They're not. There is a third of the angelic host that is fallen, that is coming down. Now, he describes that angelic host as being innumerable in the book of Hebrews. That means a man can't look at it and number it. So how many are coming down? You could be talking about millions. How are they coming down? Well, it looks like they got these little small craft. And they haven't had a haircut for almost 6,000 years. There's something that shows up, it's got hair like a woman and teeth like a lion, man. Now, either that or these are Volkswagen Beetles that disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle and they all had sunroofs. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. I mean, Hollywood, remember, what's his name? Herbie the Love Bug? He could fly. Just so you know. Yeah. Oh. All right, let's go over to the New Testament, because that is just a bizarre passage of Scripture that it will fulfill itself just like it says. Yeah. Yeah. And the inference is that wherever Babylon is, I mean, we're talking about Rome. Rome has already, they already have huge telescopes that look into space. They own them. They own observatories. They also have a delegation to receive aliens when they get here. I read that, I don't know how many years ago. We was at the Bible Baptist Blowout in, what year was that? 2010? 2010? So we were looking at 14 years ago, and I not only I heard it on the news, Fox News. They reported they have this group that are there just in case aliens show up to greet them, It'll cross, and curse them before they even get off the ground, or before they get out of the spaceship. So it's funny that, yeah. Is it called Lucifer? I know they got an observatory that they I don't know. Well, huh? Hawaii? Is it called Lucifer? A what? Yeah. Well, they're to build something like that. Listen, I know they like spending our tax money, They just love to spend our tax money. But that thing, what's it called? The accelerator? Particle accelerator is what it is. Why? Why? What's it going to do for mankind? What's it going to do unless they know it can do something and they're hoping they can, like maybe open up a time portal, maybe create a wormhole, or I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. They're cooking up something. I usually don't give man that much credit, but there are some very, very, very smart people. They may be demonics all get out, but they're smart. And a lot of times your scientists, they have all they care about is the science. They wouldn't care if they was rubbing elbows with the devil. They wouldn't care. They just care about the science. And I'm telling you, there's some serious science out there. I mean, I can't even, I brush elbows with just a little bit of it, man, and it's so far above my head, and we're talking stuff that I'd be considered a dummy at that level. And these guys are figuring out things, physics and all this, and now they believe that they've figured it out. Who knows whether even Congress or the president are aware of it. Well, we know the president's not aware of anything right now, so much less aware of that. Okay, let's go to the New Testament. Look in John chapter 6. And we're not going to be talking about any appearance of angels or even the angel of the Lord, because then it would be a lot longer, and it would just be one account after the other. And really, we've already talked about angels showing up. They got here somehow. I don't know how they get here. Now, an angel is a spirit. They're called ministering spirits. They may be able to just go bloop and then bloop and they show up. They disappear and appear. They can take on physical form especially when they're doing something for the Lord. They can. Those angels that went to Lot's house ate supper, had that poor woman knowing she's going to turn into a pillar of salt, had her cook a meal for him, ate dinner, and then took them out. Okay, I know that angels love to eat, evidently. And so anyway, probably the only meal they've ever had, if you think about it. They don't need to eat, but they can, which is nice. Our resurrection bodies are going to be like that. Anyway, look in John 6, verse 15 to 21. It says, "Then Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him a king, and he departed again into a mountain himself alone. And when the even was now come, his disciples went down into the sea." In other words, they got in the boat and started across. They're actually coming back across Galilee. They're already on the other side. They're coming back the other way. If you can read that in the beginning of the chapter. "He entered into a ship and went over the sea toward Capernaum. And it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them." See, he's headed back to Capernaum. "And the sea arose by reason of a great wind that blew. And when they had rowed about 25 and 30 furlongs, they see Jesus walking on the sea." I believe this is also the time that Peter walks on the water. Different account in a different gospel, but the same time, or the same account, but just a different description. "And drawing nigh to the ship, and they were afraid." In other words, they see him coming. "And he saith unto them, It is I, be not afraid. Then they willingly received him into the ship." And notice what it says. "And immediately the ship was at the land whither they went." Okay. You can say, well, they were already there. Well, no, because the other accounts tell you, number one, they were in the midst of the sea. The other account tells you that they went about 20 to 30 furlongs. Well, 20 to 30 furlongs is 3.5 miles, and Galilee is 8 miles wide. So, and they probably weren't rowing in a straight line, if you get my drift, because the winds were blowing. And if you've ever been out in a rowboat and the winds are blowing, I mean, you're kind of like zigzagging, you're always correcting and everything. Well, anyway, they're out in the midst of the sea when he shows up. And when he shows up, of course, he's walking on the water. There are 4 incidences here of violating the laws of physics. The first one is the fact that Jesus is walking on the water. That defies gravity and defies the tension of water surface. All kinds of things are violated there. He's walking on the water. Well, then he invites Peter to walk on the water, and Peter walks on the water. That's 2. The third instance is when the ship miraculously appears at its destination. It said they were immediately, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. And just all of a sudden they're in harbor. Just boop. Well, how do you think that happened? I mean, somehow they traveled through space and were instantly at a different location. Now, I realize for the Lord, this is pretty commonplace. I mean, it's, He's God. He can do whatever He wants. But actually, there's a fourth instance, and I'll give that to you. That's in Mark chapter 6, verse 47, 48. And when even was come, the ship was in the midst of the sea, and He alone on the land, and He saw them toiling. Listen, if He is just 1 mile away, he's probably 3.5 miles away. Because it says, the other account says they're in the midst, I believe it's this account, they're in the midst of the sea. And He sees them toiling. Oh, come on. You can't see men toiling from 3.5 miles away. Even if you're on a mountain, you just can't see that far. It says He sees them. And then He goes over there and walks over to them. Like I said, for the Lord, these things are effortless and seamless. For men, they get a bit tricky. Peter walking on the water. Now, he has the faith, and he bids him come out, and he steps out there, and he starts walking on that water. Then he looks at that wind, and he looks at those waves, and whoop, down he goes. And had the Lord not reached out and grabbed him, he'd have been Davy Jones's locker. I mean, He grabbed him and pulled him up. So it gets a little tricky for when man starts violating the laws of physics. But they did, didn't they? He did. That boat did. Huh? Yeah, I think he's pretty close at that point, isn't he? It's about the size of the Minnow, I think. The USS Minnow. This is the tale of our castaways. They're here for a long, long time. You ever seen the Minnow? Okay. It wasn't a big boat, is it? I'm trying to lighten the mood, man. We got 6 people here. Trying to make the best of it. Now, I'm glad you're all here. Glad somebody showed up. Okay. Turn to Acts chapter 8. Let's look at another one. I can't explain none of these except to say that they violated physics. It's like when the Lord said that Sabbath was made for man. He could violate the Sabbath because He's God. He's the one that made the law. He makes all the laws of the universe. Guess what? He can violate anyone He wants. Why? He's the lawmaker. So, and here we're going to find another case here. Acts chapter 8, verse 38 to 40. And He commanded the chariot to stand still, and it went down both into the water, both Philip and the eunuch, and He baptized him. And when they were come up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord caught away Philip. What does that mean? That the eunuch saw him no more. So the eunuch is coming out of the water, and he's like, praise the Lord. And next thing you know, here goes Philip flying out of the water, And he said he saw him no more. Where'd he go? Huh? That the eunuch saw him no more, went on his way rejoicing. And Philip was found at Azotus. What do you call it? Okay. Azotus is another name for Ashdod. At least what I found was. It says, but Philip was found at Azotus, and passing through, he preached in all the cities till he came to Caesarea. So, if Azotus is Ashdod, Ashdod was approximately 40 miles, because remember it says it was a desert place. Well, if you were to go down to Gaza, the further south you travel down Gaza, you get to desert. Because that's where the Sinai Desert is just beyond those borders, the border of Gaza. So it looks like he was transported 40 miles to Ashdod, dropped off, and then he preaches all the way up the coast and gets to Caesarea, which is another 57 miles. He just goes on this preaching campaign. But he got transported 40 miles. Teleportation. That's them black fellows for you. They can accept those miracles. Yeah, he's from Ethiopia, man. He's like, yes, time to go home. But he went on his way rejoicing. Anyway, and notice it says he was found at Azotus. Who was looking for him? Evidently somebody was. Maybe the Ethiopian eunuch, before he actually left the area, said, you better start looking for that white boy who was just here. He's gone. And people are looking around for him, and they found him at Azotus. Found him 40 miles away. So how'd that happen? Well, he was teleported. I mean, that's just a big scientific name for the Lord caught him and put him over here. But we're talking about a physical man here. We're not talking about an angel. We're talking about a physical man. How did God do that? Well, evidently he violated his own laws of physics and put him where he wanted him. Okay, let's look at 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And these are the last two we're going to talk about. And the first one is the Apostle Paul, and the last one is the Apostle John. Now, the Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 1 to 5, he says, "It is not expedient for me doubtless to glory. I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago. Whether in the body I cannot tell, whether out of the body I cannot tell, God knoweth. Such a one caught up to the third heaven." Now, there's that expression again, caught up. "And I knew such a man, whether in the body or out of the body I cannot tell, God knoweth, how that he was caught up into paradise and heard unspeakable words, which is not lawful for a man to utter. Of such a one will I glory, yet of myself I will not glory, but in mine infirmities." So everybody believes, and I believe, Paul's talking about himself because he's mentioning him. He's talking about that man whom he's talking about here is himself, but he's no longer. And when he says whether in the body or out of the body cannot tell, we know that he was out of the body. Why? Because all the other disciples are standing around Paul's corpse, probably weeping and wailing, and what are we going to do now? Paul's dead. They're laying there because they believed him to be dead. And for all intents and purposes, he was dead. His soul had left his body. Notice when the soul leaves the body, you can't personally tell whether you're in the body or out of the body. That's because the soul itself is a body, not a physical one. It's a spiritual body. But evidently, it is so real that he couldn't tell whether he was in his own body or out of it, when it's obvious that he was. He said one caught up to the third heaven. So he's caught up to where God is. And it had to happen pretty quick. Because while they're waiting, they're staring at him, unless they stared at him for 3 days. It said he got up, he rose up. He got up there to glory, and he's in that soulish body, that can be clothed, by the way, because you've got those souls over there in Revelation chapter 6 that are under the altar, and he gives them white robes to wear. So the soul can be clothed. As a matter of fact, it talks about our own personal righteousness is what we'll clothe those bodies with when we get to glory. The Bible says not to be found naked. So he's caught up into paradise, heard unspeakable words. Some believe that what he heard, John wrote down. And maybe one of those angels was practicing those seven utterances that we're not given any clue about what those are. You'll find that over there. I can't remember what chapter in Revelation it is, but where the seven angels sound off, and he said, John, don't write that down. So that's for the future to be revealed. Maybe he heard some of that going on. They were practicing, you know. He says, you can't talk about none of that. Acts 14, verse 19 and 20 says, And there came thither certain Jews from Antioch and Iconium, who persuaded the people, and having stoned Paul, drew him out of the city, supposing he had been dead. Howbeit, as the disciples stood round about him, he rose up and came into the city, and the next day he departed with Barnabas to Derbe. So how in the world did Paul get all the way to the third heaven and back, possibly in a matter of minutes? Well, somehow he's teleported. Now, how the Lord does that, I'm sure it's... Listen, how are we going to get there? Same way. He's going to meet us in the clouds and then open that door and away we go. Now, I know I've always heard we're going to be zooming through the universe at 10 times the speed of light. It had to be a lot faster than 10 times. It almost had to be you wouldn't see the lights anyway and the sights. It'd be going by so fast. But what if he just opens up the fabric of space and time and you just walk through it? Next thing you know, you're right there at the great deeps where he talks about there being a door. And just opens that thing up and in you go. I like a quick trip anyway. I'm not much on the travel. I don't care to fly, drive, even walk. So the sooner we get there, the better off, I think. So that's just my own personal. All right, let's look at the last one here because I got to quit. Revelation 4, 1 and 2. Now, I'm going to say something, and I'm hoping if I'm wrong, you'll correct me. But I do believe this is the only event in the Bible, or the only time in the Bible where time travel is talked about. Now, I know there's prophecy. There's tons of prophecy. The Bible's full of prophecy about things in the future, but I think this is the only time where you have time travel addressed, where it actually takes place. Does anybody know of another instance? Because I got to thinking about it, and I know there's prophecy. I know that. I'm talking about where somebody's ushered forward into the future, of which John was. In John 4, 1 to 2, it says, After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven. There's that door again. And the first voice which I heard, as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither. That's found 3 times in the Bible, and you have 3 parts to the first resurrection. Exactly that phrase, come up hither. And I will show thee things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. If you were to match this with 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 about the rapture, it's really identical. It's talking about this trumpet talking with him, or a voice talking with him. It's like a trump of God. And up he goes, come up hither, and boom, picture the church going up. John means beloved, and we're Christ's beloved. And it's a picture of him going up. It says, and immediately I was in the Spirit. Well, I don't know what all that means. I don't know if he talked about being in his new body or being in his soulish body. Obviously, it's It's a reference to something changing, whether it happens in midair. We know it's going to happen to us. Our body's going to be changed. We're going to be immortal. But we're also going to, it's something spiritual happens. Amen? We all agree with that. Not sure exactly how that's going to happen. But you notice that it says there that a door was opened in heaven. And the first thing that happens is the Lord descends. The Lord comes through that door. Door was opened in heaven. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out the verse I'm looking for now. After this, I looked at the board. The door was opened in heaven. The first voice I heard, trumpet told me to go up there. Well, I thought I had the verse where it says, I'm thinking of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel. You're just forwarded to talking about him talking there. The trumpet talking with me. And the Bible talks about the trump of God in 1 Thessalonians 4. But the first thing that happens is the door opens up and the Lord descends from heaven. Now, what's interesting about that is that when that door opens, there's the possibility of whatever else could catch a ride on that wormhole coming down. Who's to say what else is coming down at the same time? We know that the Antichrist and the false prophet show up. We know that somewhere along the line, these host of angels show up. We don't know when. Well, what if it's almost simultaneous to the rapture? What if they're coming down as we're going up? Just kind of interesting. I don't know anything for sure about that. But when John sees all this, and he's watching the tribulation in the present, he's looked at the church age in the past, and he's looking at the millennium and eternity in the future. So at present, he is 2,000 plus years, or about 2,000 years into the future, watching this take place. Now you have someone that has traveled through time. Not just space, because he's in heaven when he sees this, but he's traveled through time. And I think that is the only other place, the only place I know of in the Bible where you have time travel, where it literally talks about it happening, is right there. So, what the world thinks is science fiction was commonplace in the Bible all the way back in the book of Genesis. And time travel was established in before 100 AD because John was ushered forward in the future. So, when you see all these movies coming out, and Star Trek and, Return of the Jedi or whatever those things are, when you look at all this stuff that's coming out, you know where they're getting it? They're getting it from the Bible. Whatever their muse is getting it from the Bible. And you're not reading anything new because it's all there. It's always been there. And so when you hear something that almost seems like it's impossible, I think what's going to happen to Christians is because they won't open up their brain and their mind to seeing some of this stuff, and at least, I'm not saying that God didn't do this supernaturally. All I'm saying is that who's to say that man can't supernaturally imitate it or counterfeit it or at least make it work for them? That's what I'm saying. But who would have believed the microwave oven until it came out? I happened to be a young boy when that thing came out. And we were all just amazed. It's magic. How can you just put something in there and there's no heat element? And yet it's hot when it comes out. It's the same kind of thing. It's somebody figured out the technology of that thing. Well, as they continue to figure out things and figure things out, they're going to get there. But the Bible's already so far ahead of them. Man's always playing catch up to it. But don't think they can't catch up. The Lord said they could. He said anything they can imagine. Well, they've imagined this stuff for 50, 100 years, 200 years. And all you're seeing is all this science fiction on TV, you know, about new worlds and walking through event horizons and going from one place to another through a wormhole, transporters, all that stuff. Well, who's to say there's not some of this that's going to happen? I don't know how much have they got a handle on it. Like I said, it gets tricky. When you're not God, it gets real tricky. But there's some indication that some things are going on, and they've figured out some things. So if you, I gave you the name of the guy, now I'm trying to remember. Ashton Forbes? Ashton Forbes. You can go online and just, this guy has spent a lot of years on this. And if you like scientific jargon, scientific jargon, you'll get plenty of it. But he has physicists, he has engineers, he's asked filmmakers, people that, you know, create all this CGI stuff, and they're saying it's just too much for somebody to put together, and especially when it showed up, how many days was that? One account says that one of those videos showed up 3 days after the plane disappeared. Well, they were still looking for it. They didn't even know where it crashed. But I believe it was actually showed up on like YouTube and other places. I can't remember, 100-something days, something like that. Maybe it's a little bit longer than that. Still not long enough. Like I said, one guy created a fake in 2.5 hours that mirrored that one. But there's no way he could have figured out everything that was in that video. So it's interesting. I keep an eye on it, and I just have to check it every now and then to see if anybody's debunked it. Now, there's some that say they have, and then you kind of go back and look at it, and they say, nope, no, they haven't debunked it yet. And what you get to see is that I showed the video here. That's when Glenn Beck was interviewing the guy, and you know, Glenn's like, I don't know, you know. And I'll say the same thing, I don't know. But it is very interesting when you watch this thing. And they haven't found that plane yet. Now, if it went through a wormhole, if it went through some type of time and space, if they opened up the fabric of time or the fabric of space and it went through, we don't know where it went. So maybe it's on the bottom of the ocean. I don't know. Anyway, we'll stop with that. Anybody got any questions or comments or? That's why.